hopefully everybody can see my welcome to Xillio Insights screen now. I think
Yes,
you
yes,
do.
yes.
It's a web-based tool, so and in this case, it's user protected. Not necessarily. We can connect it to AD, but you can also leave it open. You can set up spaces, so a sales space, any type of space. I'm just going to take us through a default space. These segmentations or categorizations are normally if you have multiple business units and you don't want to share your HR information with the rest of the team. So you have one default space that has everything except for HR, and you have an HR space.
So you can create spaces per business unit. That's
Yes,
what you
but
say, right? Yeah.
exactly. Then you're presented with dashboards, and let me take you
So
through.
maybe the background, we use Kibana Elasticsearch combination
Mhm.
for this. So this is an open source tooling which we used to once we connect it to your metadata, create these kinds of visualizations and dashboards.
Yeah.
So
The
yeah.
the initial extraction is only based on metadata, so we don't even really touch your content. We really with open text systems or live link systems, access to the database, so the information on the information. That's what we extract, and that's what we through a snapshot actually visualize here. Now there are multiple layers to Kibana. There's not enough time. Even I could spend 8 hours talking about this. There's not enough time to explain all the layers. Basically, there are two. One of them is visual, which is graphics, pie charts, lines, tables, bars, stack bars, etc. And there's the raw information, which is just the listing. So table-based, what you'd expect also from an Excel file. Could be based on a single file, could be on a location. Now, normally we start, I'm quickly going to take you through some of these menu points because as said, there are too many and not all of them are that interesting for this presentation. We always start with an overview because that is important. So we said 10 terabytes. Is it 10 terabytes? And if so, is it really 10 terabytes on documents, or are there only 5 documents and are there 1,700 containers or folders, if you'd like so, per split? And we do that per source. And the source, that's what you see here. We have one source currently, but you can have multiple sources. So if you have, for example, file shares or multiple cabinets in a FileNet system or Documentum system or OpenText LiveLink system, we can split them not just per business unit, but we can also split the business unit into sources. And that will actually show you over a period of time. In this case, it's creation time. So first content here is 2017. Last bit of content in this example is 2020. So it shows you the creation of documents over time. And as you can see, there was a little bit of an import here. And we started this in 2017, so 5 years ago. I said for this demo, it's not that interesting. We have it split. We can show you, obviously, also the per source, the sizing, the difference, and the amount of documents, but that's not so interesting. The more interesting part becomes when you need to understand your content, the fact that you can actually filter on anything. So access date, modification date, location, obviously. And then there's the nice thing that we call classification, which means for each and every file type, and that can be based on MIME type or that can be based on file extension, for example. We classify it. So is it a video? Is it a database? Is it an executable? Is it an Office document? Is it a PDF? Etc. Etc. So we have a default of 16 categories, classification categories, where each and every document fits in. And if not, we can add your own classification. So if it's specific to your environment file type, we can add that as well. And the nice thing is we can actually play around with it. So we can look at the executables, which we don't want, or we can look at the Office files or the PDF files now, just by clicking on it. So the whole visual interface, not the raw one, but the visual interface is clickable and it filters on whatever you click. So it can be a time range. So 2020 up until now is interesting. So let's zoom in on that fact. How many documents were created which month? Or in this case, and that's also for the demo, of course, this is the modification date, so not the creation date. But classification is nice, and we have one file type, PDF. But you can imagine that if you have, for example, Office documents, I will take the one. Oh, sorry. taken out the wrong one. Excuse me. If you look at the Office documents, you have various types. You have Word documents, you have Excel files, but you also have old Word documents, so the historic ones from very long time ago, which might not be compatible. We can identify them as well, right? Just by clicking either here on the file extension, or by you can click on the graph, or you can click arrange, and all of the visualizations change. Now, it's nice to have graphs, but you also need to get more knowledgeable about your content. So when I look at those Word documents, those docs, so I can filter them in, I can also filter them out. So I can also say, don't do everything except for these docs. So and in an exclusion filter, it'll actually show me, this was actually based on the FileNet system. Documentum, I don't even know anymore. Documentum system. No, this is OpenText Enterprise. It's OpenText one. So it shows me the location. So this was below Enterprise and then Finance and Finance 2020, where most of the documents, docs, binary files, have been modified. And not just visually with a heat map, but also by the number of documents and by the file sizing. And as you can see, if I hover mouse over everywhere, I can filter on either location or source or number of documents, anything. And of course, there's also the listing. So I can actually zoom in on it's this, and of course a demo. What is this document? So this finance document, I can expand it and have a real look at it. When was it modified, access created, etc., etc. So I can go from a very high level, a whole date range. I can look into classification, being Office. Then I can even go into a file type or file extension, if you like, and up into a location or up into actual file without even having opened the file. And it tells me the created, active date, etc., the file sizing. So one of the things that we normally produce from this is a sort of report of, for example, 0-byte Office files, because if you have a 0-byte Office file, those are corrupt. There might be you might be able to restore them from a backup, but as they are currently in your system, then at the moment they're corrupt. Do you want to exclude them? Do you want to do something else with them? So creating those.
So you say, do you want to delete them or so you build a business rule on them? Is that then the outcome of a decision?
Exactly. And we do that with 0-byte files. You do that with large files. You do it with file extensions. So I've taken out the Office file and the Word document. But as you know, we also have executables which have no place in the document management system. Could be on the file ship, but not in the document management system. They really don't work there. So you can exclude them, and also its accompanying files. And you can create a list of where are they located, how much is it actually of that those terabytes, and you can create business rules. Let's not do the executables, or look at the video classification or audio classification. There's also music here, like MP3s, WAV files, etc. Do you want to store them in a digital asset management system? You can do it with pictures. You can do it with any type of classification. And as I said, these are the default ones that we, when we do an analysis, provide to you. Database.
Werner? Chris asks about the long file name, so the 265 plus character file path. How do you treat that? A typical question we get a lot. So
we do. So we have file and folder analysis. So this is based on a structure. So what we do here is, again, the summary of documents, because if you add a filter, date modification, whatever filter, you want to see how much with the scope you're talking about, hence also the sources there. But what we have, for example, indeed, is the maximum path length, and then also the list of the path length. So 85 is this path at a task group URL. I said it's demo content, don't hold it against me. And also the longest file name. And what we normally do, so if this exceeds the 320, 350, so for SharePoint, it's 400 currently, and then you have to take off some for the tenant name and the site and the site and document library, etc. But if you take all of that off and you estimate it of 320, you go over it, then you can have a look and create a report on what are locations, are there any common names. So we also have Word, what do you call them, containers here, a Word map, and these are all integrated. So you can take all the filters that you have and all the locations. You can take them from dashboard, from visualization to any other visualization, and you can have a look at. All right, so apparently 2018, which I'm not going to abbreviate, but if it was a long file name or folder name, right, I could abbreviate that. So it would be very, very easy to figure out which one is the longest or used the most. As you can see here also, empty folder analysis. So we don't do anything with empty folders.
Does it answer your question enough, Chris?
Partly. Is there an option then to actually do the renaming in here? Does it allow you to do that mapping, or does it just allow you to see what needs to be renamed?
It shows you what needs to be renamed, and you can create a report of these are the things that are too long and we want it renamed. So the export could be a list, could be either a simple plain text file, could be Excel, could be Word document, graphic, doesn't matter. But that report, that's something that we would then work on. All right, so are we going to take a folder name and abbreviate it? Are we going to replace it with something else? Are we just going to shorten it completely?
Yes. But the idea is that you create the business rule that renames the file name into the target system with the new name, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So that's what we do. Yeah.
Okay. Great.
Okay. Cool. So we and I don't know whether I still have duplicate analysis here. So we also do an analysis of duplicate content. So and that's not based on meta information. So if we want to do a real proper duplicate analysis, what we do, we actually read the file and hash it. That's what you see on the left-hand side. Technical, hash it, and that actually gives you a sort of identifier for the content. If you then have another file which has the same hash, that means that the content, even though the file name is different or the location is different or both, it might even have a different file size, strangely enough, because it comes from a different file system type. But if the content is the same, it'll tell us this. We cannot obviously identify what the original is, but we do know that there are duplicates, meaning that you could save content to migrate just by removing the duplicates. Sometimes there are also good reasons why there is a duplicate. Hence, what we've introduced is, because this is the complete duplicates, and I don't see it here, we also have a duplicate with the same parent. That means that the file and the duplicate file are actually located in the same location, just might have a different name. And what we normally tend to see, and this actually tells us that, is document 1.docx, copy of document 1.docx, which is the same file, something like that. So someone did copy paste and then forgot about it. That happens. But you can save and clean up your content quite easily with duplicates. We also do duplicate analysis just based on file name and file size, meaning that there's a less, it's not 100%, but it's still a very high percentage of files that we identify as these are duplicates because they are named the same and they have the same file size, most likely the same content. We look at version, we look at active content, so date accessed. That actually helps you in determining which content is the access the most in which locations, and that allows you to set a sort of cutoff date for archiving. So I know if you have to retain everything, then archiving doesn't make sense, but you have to think of it like this. If you have 20,000 files in a document library and you need to find that single file, or there are 200 documents in the document library and the other ones are in an archive, even though they do belong together, but you're not going to look at them. And active content will actually tell you that. Well, we already had containers. There's version analysis. So how many versions are there? We have seen systems with 5,000 to 6,000 versions. Do you really want to take all of the versions along, or just the last 100 versions, for example? Those are all possibilities on cleaning and understanding your content. So if you have a couple of documents which are versioned a lot, let's say over 1,000, then those apparently are documents that have been worked on hard and often modified. So those are important documents. So you can pick those out and then possibly even ignore the rest if they still have a.
So I think it's good to say that in every example that you make, the answer to the query that you do and the question that you ask the system is it can lead to a migration or a business rule, cleaning it, leaving it behind, or doing something with the metadata. That is at migration execution.
Yeah. So
right.
exactly as Ruud says. Thank you for that, because it really means that because you can identify content types, content versions, you can do things with them. So you can indeed place them in a different location, delete them, rename them, but we can identify. So with this, you could create those rules and say, all right, it's the last version, any version older than this, etc., etc. Well,
I think what I hear a lot is like deciding on the type of storage that you choose, whether you choose active content in
yeah,
SSD storage and choosing cold storage for more archiving purposes, for instance. It saves you a
yes,
lot of money on storage, things like
yeah.
that.
Especially when it comes down to the terabyte. So it's and a cost perspective, and it's also a workability and effectiveness perspective, depending on how you design your target system. So this actually can influence how you design your target system. If you have more than 40,000 files or 1,000,000 files in a SharePoint document library, if that is your target system, right? You might want to reconsider whether you want that or you want it split up, and does it then makes sense to split it up per year. So we can do analysis, show me for this location per year, just a count, how many files are there, or the file extensions, which type of files are there, were they built in 2017, 2018, 2019. Does it make sense to actually split them up per year? Does it make sense to split them up per type, classification, etc.? So these are indeed the input, knowing your content, for the business rules that you can create to actually move, migrate, delete, clean, whatever you want to do.
And it also helps you in the design phase of the target system itself, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
We've from experience, I've seen lots of times. So either the design is already there because the users are already working with the system, the target system, or the design gets adjusted, modified, refined, if you'd like, after this analysis phase, because then you realize, all right, so we need a lot more document libraries, or we need a lot more sites, or we need flows, do things. All right. As said,
you have
we also
5 minutes. And
yeah,
then
I know. No,
is there anything that you really want to tell us?
Audit trail compliancy. That's also something which is so we can and do also analyze audit trails and migrate them in a secure and compliant manner. So you know what has happened. So from the old system to a new system. And when I say migrate, I don't mean that we can inject it into another system's audit trail system, but into a securely location next to it. And that helps you retain what has happened. So if you move from a system, you need to safeguard and capture for any kind of what's it called, CNR, security checks, audits, etc. You need to be able to tell what has happened to a document. And if you move from a system with a lot of migrations, you lose that information. Now, what we can do is we can analyze that and tell you, all right, remove all this information for those documents that you haven't deleted and are going to move to the target system. We're going to move them to, and then the target is your choice. So is it another database? Is it an Excel file? Is it just plain and simple files next to the files, right? So extra files.
I've heard examples of when this audit information is like really important and needs to be accessed often, then you can create a right mouse button action to read. So you click on a file, you want the audit trail information, you right click on that file, and it's being retrieved from the database that we store the audit information into. So as use cases to do that, and otherwise, just put it in an Excel file or in a database, and whatever.
Yeah, indeed. So indeed, we have one customer where it's a context to SharePoint, an additional context menu entry has been added for only migrated content. So it identifies whether a document is a migrated one, so from the old LiveLink system, 9.7, if I'm not mistaken. It identifies it, and then it can, because of the ID, retrieve all of its audit information. So not just from the actual SharePoint Compliance Center, but also from the old LiveLink system. So their security people are really happy what has happened there. Yeah, we do user information analysis and permissions. So the difference is, of course, what has a user done, and permissions is more of what are the permissions. So on each and every document. Is it inherited? Where is it broken? How often is it broken? And that actually helps determining, for example, whether content is sensitive. So sometimes, especially with larger systems, you really don't know anymore if there's not a metadata option. How do I identify whether content is sensitive? Now, one method would be by identifying, does it have a group with everybody in it, or does it only have 2 explicit users that can have access to it, or a group with 10 users? Then it becomes a different sensitivity level, if you'd like. So, and that piece of analysis, as Ed said correctly, takes some time to actually think of it. How do I want this? So, what do I want to take along? And use and create a migration rule on a business rule, business logic. Do everything except this if this user, this file type from this date, once it moved, etc., etc., etc. And as said, so this whole thing comes together. You create a report, you create a migration rule, you share it with us, and then we can move.